Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I know that people will be continuing to come in, but we want to make sure that we have enough time to cover everything today. Thank you so much for participating in the first of a 4-part workshop series on science communication and policy impact. I wanted to highlight the upcoming workshops. The next workshop will be on leveraging your research for policy impact and writing a day 1 policy memo. This workshop is a collaboration with the Federation of American Scientists and their day 1 project, where they collect policy memos, help you draft them, refine them, identify key stakeholders in the federal government, and they will help to ensure that your policy memo actually gets into the hands of those who can make a decision on your proposal. So it's a great opportunity to have direct impact on policy, especially with a new administration coming in January 2025. Workshop 3 will be a continuation of that work. We're titling it Pitching the President and Providing Effective Guidance to Policymakers. Now, as part of that workshop, there will be a writing portion. So you can see that one is a 2-hour workshop. So we'll actually work together. I know we're all busy, so it's kind of nice to have carved out time where you're going to work collaboratively and get a draft done of your policy memo. And then the last workshop is engaging with legislative and regulatory processes. I'm sure many of you have received emails from colleagues or from staffers or others where they have seen a request for information or a request for comment or comments on notices of proposed rulemaking. And it can seem overwhelming. How do you effectively provide guidance to those policymakers? Well, we will train you up on how to do that effectively and in a way that's efficient for your very, very busy schedule. On here, you can register by using the QR code, or you can go to citrispolicylab.org/SCPI workshops. Now, I wanted to give a quick overview of CITRIS and the CITRIS Policy Lab. The CITRIS Policy Lab is part of a 4-campus institute, CITRIS and the Banatow Institute. We are headquartered at UC Berkeley, but we also operate on the campuses of UC Davis, UC Merced, and UC Santa Cruz. Our mission is to develop IT solutions that address society's most pressing challenges. The CITRIS Policy Lab helps that mission by translating empirical research into policy deliverables for both the public and private sector. We work internationally, nationally at the federal level, state level, and city. If you are interested in identifying additional ways to translate your research into these impactful policy deliverables, please reach out to us. I've included my email below, and we provide a variety of services for you. We can help you develop appropriate policy recommendations, strategize on the appropriate methods for how to communicate your research and policy recommendations. We can even assist you in writing policy memos and briefs and in writing white papers, op-eds, one-pagers, slide decks, etc. So it's definitely a resource that we want to make available to our community. The work that we do across the UC system is very important for ensuring that we are developing sound policy strategies. I also want to highlight our video and podcast series, TecHype, where we debunk misunderstandings around emerging technologies and the laws and policies that shape them. If any of you joining today work in the AI space, you will know that there are hundreds of bills proposed at the federal and state level around AI, and we highlight the ones that are the most impactful or the most likely to be passed into law in short videos. We call these TLDRs, too long didn't read, where we will analyze and summarize the main components of applicable laws, regulations, executive orders, etc. I'm honored to have Tiffany Lowater join us today. She is the Assistant Dean for Communications at the UC Berkeley College of Computing, Data Science, and Society. Definitely an expert in helping to guide science communication. Now, prior to joining Berkeley in 2021, she led communications at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS, in Washington, D.C., With more than 20 years of experience in science communication, she has designed, implemented, and evaluated numerous strategic communications plans, developed thousands of collaborative relationships at the individual and institutional level, and secured accurate media coverage for innovative scientific research. Lowwater also has expertise in policy, philanthropy, and public engagement, and a deep understanding of issues at the intersection of science, technology, higher education, and society. Lowwater founded the Communicating Science program at AAAS, which provided communication and media training for more than 18,000 scientists and engineers, and reached thousands more scientists via online resources. She has also worked in communications at the Johns Hopkins University Institute for Nanobiotechnology and Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. But before I pass it to our esteemed guest speaker today, a few housekeeping rules. Please put your questions into the chat, and you can put these questions into the chat throughout the presentation, and Tiffany and I will be monitoring that, and we will raise up questions as we are able to the group. You can upvote somebody else's question by clicking the thumbs up icon. If you hover over the small smile icon that you see next to the chat, you'll see the thumbs up. So that way we can see that this is a question that a large portion of our attendees today are very concerned about, and we can raise that question up and prioritize it. And again, we encourage you to register for the upcoming workshops. You can go to citrispolicylab.org/SCPI workshops. And with that, I'm going to pass it to our guest speaker today, Tiffany Lowwater. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Brandie. It's such a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate you inviting me. As you know, I'm a big fan of the work that CITRIS does, and I think that this is a great opportunity to include more people in that conversation. Hello, everybody. It's nice to see you. I know some of you from my current work and from past work, and it's really nice to be back talking about science communication. As Brandie mentioned, I've been doing this for about 24 years. Been working in the area and seen a lot of change, but also some of the same things happening. I was at the American Association for the Advancement of Science for many years, and I did a lot of training for scientists at that place. But I joined Berkeley in May 2021 to help develop a new college. As Brandie mentioned, the College of Computing, Data Science, and Society at Berkeley is the first new college that Berkeley has started in 50 years, if you can believe it. So it's really exciting to be part of that experience, and happy to say we were successful and we're now launched and doing great work with our students and faculty. Just to give you a little bit more information on why I came here, some of you may know that AAAS's the AAAS's mission is advancing science and serving society. When I saw that there was a college that was starting that had the word society in its name, I was so excited because I thought this is exactly what universities should be thinking about. How do we connect our research to the greater good, and also to make sure that it's relevant to what people are interested in? So we're very interested in connecting computing, data science, and statistics are our areas that we teach students in, but also connecting it to actual real world applications. We have programs in computational precision health, for example, a lot of work in climate and other places where we want to make sure that data science and computer science are both informed by public need and desire, as well as giving people the things that they need to do their work. So I'm going to start off by asking, and people want to use the chat. As mentioned, that's what how we're asking people to talk to us today. What do you think of when you hear the term science communication? Does anyone want to put things in the chat? What does science communication mean to you? I see people thinking, but maybe not typing yet. So I'll just say, I think science communication is something that we talk about in terms of what the purpose is for the messaging that we're trying to deliver, as well as making sure that it's the kind of thing that is publicly available, hopefully connects to some kind of audience that's outside of science. So scientists often are very comfortable speaking with other scientists in their field, but oftentimes they need some help thinking about, how do I communicate this with other groups of people? And so to me, that's the main piece that needs to happen. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my slides back. I'm not being able to advance them for some reason. Give me a second. There we go. And connecting scientific information with specific public-facing audiences is what I start trying to help scientists think about. You may be very keen to talk to other scientists about your work, but when we're thinking about communication for other groups of people, who is it that you're thinking of, and how can we help them understand what you're talking about and hopefully engage with you in a conversation? That can be a real challenge for scientists who are very used to speaking perhaps to only people in their field. So I do think it requires a bit more thought and a better understanding of why we do the way we do. This is a graph that we used to use in our workshops at AAAS, and I think it has a really good connection to thinking, how do scientists talk to public audiences? How do scientists talk to scientific audiences? You think about the typical journal paper, you start out with a lot of research background, you give a lot of supporting details. At the very end, you say, and here's what we found. And often when you're speaking to audiences that aren't scientists, they are very much like, what did you find? Why should I care? And I'll stick around for some of the supporting details. And so I think that this is just causes people to think a little bit differently about how they communicate their work. It doesn't mean you have to completely change the importance that you place on something or the accuracy, but it is about making things more relevant so that scientists who can understand how other people are thinking about their work as well as how they themselves want to communicate. One of the things that I like to help scientists think about is their role, their identity in the space. So, we are all, many of us work for scientific institutions or academic institutions or potentially federal agencies or state agencies. And so we are kind of positioned within that space. And scientists themselves are part of those institutions as well, but they're also part of the bigger collective, right? The societal pieces. And so when they're talking to audiences, they should be thinking about, how can I identify myself? What are the pieces that I feel comfortable explaining why I'm speaking about it this way? I think this also gets to motivation. Why is it that you want to communicate about your work? What are your goals? And so I think that those are all important things to think about before you get into a conversation or into a discussion, let's say with a policymaker. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And so today we're going to talk a little bit about goals, audiences, messages, going to talk a bit about visuals. And I think most important to this is thinking about, what impact are you trying to make? What is it that you want to see different in the world? Because that will help you figure out what your goals and your audiences and your messages are. So first of all, I'd like to ask maybe anybody who wants to type in if you feel particularly excited about this, but I think it's important for us to think about, why do you do what you do? What is it that gives you importance in the work that you do? Because many of us are doing the work that we do because we want to make a change in the world. We want to see something different. I do what I do because I want to help scientists and researchers think about the greater good, the greater world, and how their work can make a difference, and also how they can connect with audiences that are outside of science to make sure that those types of things happen and that they can have an impact in the world. I often hear from scientists who are frustrated with the way things are, the way the world works. And I say to them, well, then you have to be part of connecting your work to those things. You have to think about, how do we connect the work to the things that you care about? And also thinking about why people care about your work and how you can connect to them in a bigger way. So I will ask scientists when I work with them, what do you want to accomplish through your efforts? What is it that you're hoping you can change? What impact do you want to make? Recognizing that there may be a very big goal at the end of 10 years from now that you're looking for, but this is iterative over time. How is it that you can make a difference? Camille is saying helping to make a beneficial social impact through technology, right? So how do we think about, that's a really broad goal. And so for the people who are doing specific work, maybe what is the specific piece of that you can do with your communication? So here are some sample goals that I just have collected over time. And obviously there are many more goals in this. This is a kind of the idea that people need to come up for themselves what their goals are. What is the goal for you for your communication? Sometimes scientists are seeking to share accurate and relevant information in an accessible way. That could be a goal. If you go down towards the bottom, maybe I want to connect to policymakers. I want to make sure that the conversations about science and policy are relevant and that science can inform that. Perhaps framing information for use by decision makers, people who are going to be making decisions about science. Building relationships with stakeholders, that could be members of a community that engage with the research that you're involved in. And I also feel like the building trust is a goal that many scientists are interested in. I want to make sure that people trust the work that we're doing so that they can be part of it and so that we can understand what it is that they need from us. So I'm actually trying to get information from people so that I can better understand how to respond to their needs. So I will ask you, and I always start this when I talk to scientists about this thing, what are your goals? Thinking about your goals is really important because it will help you figure out what it is you want to do with your communication and what it is you want to say and who you want to speak to. So I always suggest to scientists literally write them down, type them, write them down, put them in notes, whatever works for you. Put them aside for a couple days, think about it a little bit, come back and review and update, and then talk to someone about your goals. It helps to do it to a colleague, maybe someone who works in your same area, or a friend or a family member, someone who might know something about your work, but not really understand how it's connected to the broader society. Think about that a little bit. And I think the listening to feedback is helpful. Doesn't mean you have to use it, but it is helpful when people ask you questions. They're not quite sure they understand. What is it that you're trying to do? Why are you trying to accomplish this? Why is this connected to me or to another audience? I think that's really can be really helpful to have those types of conversations, both with people who work in your field because they have experience doing this, some of them, and with others who may not. So then I'm going to talk a little bit about audiences. What kinds of audiences are going to help you support your goals, are going to help you approach your goals, to help get to a place where you can actually do something about your goals? And I think really importantly is, do you know how to reach these audiences? Sometimes we have very comfortable getting to the audiences of people that we know, my family or this community that I've been working with, or perhaps the church that I go to, or other places where I would see it. But if there are audiences that you're trying to reach that are outside of your normal realm, maybe I want to talk to policymakers, but I haven't really engaged in that space before. It helps to know a bit more about your audience and talk to people who do know those audiences. This is where Brandie, I think, was mentioning she could be very helpful in this regard. You have interest in doing something, haven't done it before, like information that are with it. So about how you might be interested in the topic that you're talking about. What great examples of people who really wanted to reach an audience, but then realized, oh, I'm not the right messenger. This is not an audience who's going to listen to me, but I could maybe connect with someone else who knows them well and help them with what they're doing. So sometimes it's that piece as well, recognizing when you have a clear indicated opportunity with audiences and recognizing when it might be somebody else's opportunity, but you can help them do their work too. And I think thinking about the questions audience might ask, this is really important for scientists. I think we often have a lot of information in science about things that we want to get out there, things that we want people to know, but we aren't always thinking about what kinds of questions people have about what we do, why we're doing what we're doing, what the implications of that are there risks? Those are the types of questions that I really feel like scientists who want to engage in a more public conversation should be thinking about in advance of those conversations. And then when you have the conversation, when you talk to someone about these things, when you do messaging, you get responses. You'll hear something from someone and it will actually help inform, hopefully, the way that you talk about it again, make you better informed in order to have conversations with your audience. So some tips that I would just say is important to keep in mind for working with audiences. You need to consider their interests and needs, not just your own. I think sometimes we come at it from like, this is what I want. I want them to know this. I want them to have this. I want them to be able to do this. And we really need to be thinking from the standpoint of, for this audience specifically, what is it that I can give people? What can I provide that would be helpful to them? How can I make a connection to someone so that they will want more information from me? They will want to ask me questions. They will trust me as a messenger. And then how do we develop the messages to make them relevant to that particular audience? If you're working on something and it has to do with plants, and you can talk to gardeners, thinking about how you're going to make connections with a person as they're doing something, as opposed to just a random abstract concept, I think is really important. I think also encouraging conversation information exchange. That should always be in the back of your mind. Instead of trying to promote conflict or get into an argument or maybe push your perspective, always thinking about it from the perspective of getting something from someone else. I can learn from what they're telling me in order to think about how to communicate this more. And I think that that's a really important piece, just to go into being open and receptive to other perspectives and feedback. And thinking about it not necessarily as, well, I'm right because I'm the scientist and this is what science says, but more like, here's a conversation that I want to start with you and I want to give you my perspective and I want to hear your perspective. I always think that's really important to be open to other conversations. Clearly, it doesn't mean that you have to change your mind or disagree, you could disagree, but I think the way, the tone that it's set in terms of having a conversation is really important so that you can continue to have those conversations and learn from each other. I've listed here a couple of sample audiences, and I've tried to make it a little more examples of the kinds of things that I'm talking about. So sometimes people say, oh, I want to inform policy. I want to make sure policymakers know what I'm talking about and how to use this information for their decision making. And I'll always say, which policymakers? Where do they live? Who are they? Which places are you going to find them? Are you talking about the actual legislator? Are you talking about the staff member who is collecting information for that staff member, for example? So I've given you a couple lists here, just ideas of different types of audiences and how to more narrow down on reaching the audiences that you're really interested in. And obviously there can be more and very different ones than these. This is just samples. And then I think thinking about which kind of audiences you want to engage. So I would say in addition to writing down your goals, if you have an opportunity or a chance or some time today, think about identifying 2 to 3 audiences you'd like to target with the communication efforts based on the goals that you have outlined. How are you going to get more information about them? What is it that you want to tell them? Obviously, there could be an endless amount of audiences, but I'm trying to narrow down just to get it more specific for this particular purpose. And I'm going to talk a little bit about messaging, because I think this is really important. Many people say, I have my summary of my research paper, I have an abstract, I'm just going to push that out to people. And I always think to myself, that's great if you're talking to other scientists or perhaps trying to get people interested in your field. Many people in audiences out in the public are not going to read a scientific abstract and immediately be attached to it. That's part of the reason why we have journalists in the world and other people who translate scientific information to make it more manageable for public audiences to respond to and see what the connections are to their life. So some of the considerations that I like to remind people about messaging is that they should be miniature, meaning short, brief, they could be expanded longer, memorable, it should be something people can think about and that you will remember when you're talking to them, and it should have some meaning to it. Why is this important? Why do you care about this? So in miniature, I mean 3 points. I always try to say that it could be an outline, like 3 things that you want people to know about what it is you're talking about. And then you can fill in the blanks underneath that. So you can go into more additional detail, but you don't have to go put all of the information right up front. You can kind of have 3 pieces that you want to share and then details under that. It allows you to remember like some of the things that you want to say. It allows you to circle back to the conversation. If it gets out of, off topic, you can come back to, oh, well, and I really want to make sure that you understand this point. One other piece I want to make sure to think about is jargon. How many of you struggle with how to take jargon out of your communication? It's a challenge I think we all face, and the level of jargon can sometimes be overwhelming. One thing that I like to remind people is that something that means a very specific thing in your field may mean something different in a different field. And so even thinking about the jargon between sciences can be a challenge. But I think making sure that you are using terms that are familiar to your audience, not just scientific terms, because those are not always going to be accessible to everyone. So, and it does depend on who your audience is, obviously. If you're talking to program officers at NSF or something, they will know many of the terms that you're talking about. So this is why identifying your audience is really important, so that you can think about how can I connect the work that I'm giving, the information that I'm giving to the person that I'm talking to. I think trying out your messages with family or friends, or again, a colleague maybe, but somebody who's not in your field of research or somebody who wants to know more about what you're doing so that they can ask you questions. This is where you can really get a sense as to how much jargon may be in your messaging, because people who know you very well might feel comfortable saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you please explain that a little bit? And that might help you get to a point where you can simplify it a little bit more. Being memorable is important, because one thing that you want to do is keep always in the back of your mind, what are the messages that I want to get across? This kind of is helpful for, say you're going to be doing a media interview and you know that they're going to be asking you about a specific thing. What are the 3 things that you want to make sure to get across to this reporter before you get off the phone or before you're done with the interview? I think making sure that there are things that you're going to remember and that you can circle back to is really important, but also thinking about helping your audience remember what it is you're going to say. Sometimes when there's a lot of information being given in a very short period of time, people walk away and say, wow, that was great, or wow, that was over my head and I didn't get anything out of that conversation. Just think about some of the times that you're talking to students, maybe, or other places where you feel like, did I get anything out of that? Is there something that I could have explained more or better so that people understood what I was trying to say? So some things like that can help are popular cultural references. I know for lecturers who are talking to students, they're always trying to think about how can I connect this to what the students are going through and what their lives are like, or analogies or alliteration, things that will help you remember. So I did it with miniature, memorable, and meaningful. I gave an example of how I could remember those three messages. And then meaningful, I think, is really important. Sometimes I've talked to scientists who are very passionate about their work, but they're nervous about displaying that to other people because they maybe want to be taken very seriously in terms of a researcher. But I actually think that the more of your passion or frustration or excitement that you can show in your work, that is conveyed as a personal human emotion that people can understand. And so when you try to talk to people who don't do the work that you do or who aren't that familiar with your topic, making sure that you do something that will allow them to connect to you as a person, I think can be really powerful. I've seen people do this before where it's been really well done in terms of talking about their family or maybe an issue that happened to them, maybe a health issue that they've experienced or worked in. And I think that allows people to connect with you because they've gone through some similar experiences. So I think that's something for scientists to think about. Not everybody's comfortable sharing a lot of their own personal work, but I do think the identity piece of it and how you're connecting with audiences should be something that you're thinking about. So I'm going to give you a sample 3-point message. This is not something that I've used specifically, but this is kind of an area similar to how you would do this type of thing. So I work obviously in computer science. AI algorithms is a huge part of the work that a lot of the researchers that I'm working on. And we do work in terms of connecting that to medicine and doctors and precision health. So this is an example of a message that one could give. The use of algorithms in medicine, like all technologies, poses both risks and benefits. One risk could be incomplete or biased data could deprive patients from receiving healthcare services because it's not something that they can connect to. A benefit could be a well-developed and well-employed algorithm can find patterns in large amounts of data, which can help doctors detect disease and treat patients. So there's like anything, can be good and could be bad. And then the third message could be we're working to maximize the benefits and minimize the risks. And then people can come to you and say, oh, I want to hear more about the risk. Can you tell me what kinds of things are you talking about there? What does that look like? Do you have other examples of how algorithms can be harmful? And if they want to talk more about the benefits, you'd be able to talk more about what that looks like. And then even what are the opportunities there? How are you going to be maximizing benefits and limiting risks? So I think this is the kind of thing where it can be an outline in terms of helping you organize what it is you want to say and also allowing you to get questions on the things that you are willing to talk about and want to have conversation about. Notice I didn't put every risk for algorithms under risk and every benefit under. I'm giving people a way to introduce the topic and then have a conversation about it afterwards. So if you're interested in pursuing this continued process, I would ask that you could think about writing down 3 messages that speak to your communication goal, that reach your target audience, and that you could use to outline a communication to the target audience that you're thinking of. All right, one note about visuals, because Brandie had mentioned this is something that she thinks is really important, and I agree. And I think it depends on the type of communication that you're doing. Obviously, if you're giving a talk, that the visuals are going to be important for slides and that type of thing, but maybe not for mass audiences. I think one of the things that I see the most, and this probably comes from working for a publication that had to simplify a lot of graphs and tables for others to understand, for journalists, for example, is that the graphs and tables are often very complex and hard for people to pick up on. And this is why data visualization has become such a thing. This is why journalists employ data analysts to actually take that data and turn it into something that they are hoping that others can use. And so I think that one of the things that is really important to think about when you're simplifying your visuals is that you still want to have it be accurate, but be relevant and accessible to the audience that you're speaking to. And that we don't want to have multiple different things in a space that makes it too overwhelming for people to respond to and react to. Color selection, obviously everybody knows this by now, is really important, both for understanding information presented and for accessibility. There's a lot of resources available online. I'm sure many of you have seen them and hopefully are using them. That we can use to do better. And I think that this is also where working with a professional communicator or someone who can help you internalize the information that you're trying to share and think of ways that it could be presented in a visually compelling way. It can be really helpful. Many scientists I know may have some of those skills in their graduate students or others, but they may need to have a little bit additional help to make sure that it's simplified and in a way that can be accessible to an audience. So I just have an example here of one that I saw the New York Times did in multiple different ways that I thought was really interesting. So if you just look at this quickly, you can see, oh, okay, this is going up over time. There's some colors differences. It gets really hot at the end. That's why they're using the red. But it's showing, if you see this piece at the bottom, the average temperature is way down here. So when people talk about how records are changing to become the hottest year, this is why, right? This is showing over time how that's happening. And you don't have to spend 20 minutes looking at this to be able to quickly understand that's an up curve. It's going up very quickly. There's a lot of data points on this graph, but you can see how quickly, how much that is obvious to someone who looks at this very quickly. So a couple of different mechanisms for communicating about your work, and then we're going to have some time for questions. So I appreciate people putting those in the chat. Feel free to write questions or comments in the chat, and we'll try to get to them in a few minutes. One of the things that I think is really important for people to think about is how they can be most effective in the communication that they want to do. This gets back to your goals. What is it that you want to change? What do you want to see different? How do you want to participate? But also recognizing, where do I have a skill or a real interest or a connection that I can work on? I can either do some additional work in that, or it's an area that I want to learn more about. And so Brandie was mentioning earlier about policy work. There's going to be workshops coming on this in this series about how to write a policy memo, how to do a policy briefing. For those who haven't done that before and want to get involved in policy work, that's a really great experience, even if you're not going to be doing it on a regular basis, to see what goes into that. How do you think about how to write something like that? It's a really great opportunity for people who are interested in policy, who maybe want to better understand how that world works. Or an op-ed. I have an opinion about something, but I don't have no connections to journalists. I don't know the op-ed editors. There's a lot of individuals out there who have worked on helping scientists and others write up their information in an op-ed that can be usable by a publication. So these are all areas where there are people who can help you. I think that's one of the things I always want to make sure scientists know. I'm always interested when there's surveys. People say, oh, I want to be involved in communication, but I don't know where to go to. And I always say, most of us, at least in institutions, have communicators. They literally work with scientists all the time to help them with these things and to help them grow their own skills and expertise so that they can do this without the help of a communicator if they'd like. But just for you all to know, there's a lot of individuals, probably in your institutions, that are out there looking for opportunities like this to share what they know and how they can help partner with scientists to communicate about their work. So media interviews, there's a lot of opportunities for scientists to do media, but also to get better training in how to do media so that they can connect with journalists and make sure that their information is usable for media interviews. And social media is a whole nother area as well. And I don't have a lot of time to go into all the detail there. If you want to talk to me about science and social media, I'd be happy to. There's a lot of opportunities for scientists, but there's also a lot of concerns about scientists about why should I participate in this very public forum that can sometimes be very negative. So thinking about how you're going to engage, what are the things that you need to do to prepare yourself, and what resources are available for you so that you can get ready for these types of engagements is really important. So if you're not sure what you want to do, you don't know where to go, talk to your professional communicator. We want to help. If you look at your institution and you go to the communications section or public affairs or whatever organization, whatever it's called where you are, feel free to reach out to that person and see what they may have available, because we do want to help you be able to reach public audiences. So I think one of the other pieces I would ask is that you reflect on your impact. We talked about that in the very beginning. Write down what goal, what kind of thing you want to see change in the world, and then sit down and think about it a little bit. What is it that you really want to accomplish through your research? How do you want to have an impact? And how communications help you reach your goals? I think many scientists and researchers I've worked with recognize that this is a really valuable skill to have. It will help them when they're grant writing. It will help them in conversations with potential funders. It will help them when they're talking to media, other places, policymakers. But I really think it's important for people to think through, how is this connected to your actual research? How can it be part of your research goals? So that it doesn't feel like it's something that's on the side, but is actually in connected very closely to how you make a difference. I did want to mention before I go into some of the questions, and hopefully we can have a little bit of a conversation here, that there are other workshops coming up, as Brandie mentioned before. There's a policy impact, writing a day one policy memo on October 11th. There's pitching the president, providing effective guidance, as Brandie mentioned, on November 8th, and engaging with legislative and regulatory processes on November 15th. If you have interest in policy and have not yet done some of these things, I would encourage you to register so that you can get more information and learn more about the resources that are available to improve your skills in that area. And if everyone has questions, please put your questions in the chat. I will try to go up and see which questions that have already been asked while you all are still thinking about.
Hi, Tiffany. I've been monitoring some of the questions in the chat, and I think there's some that are really interesting. I like Allie's question. In our increasingly interdisciplinary world, would you classify scientists from one discipline communicating their work to scientists of a different discipline as science communication? I wonder if the techniques we use to communicate with the public have a lot of overlap with the techniques we should use to communicate with our near peers in science fields.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Allie. I have seen that for sure be the case. And in fact, I think that that's a lot of times where scientists feel like, oh, I can see how challenging this is to communicate to other disciplines within my field, how much more it must be to communicate publicly. And often PhD students, in my experience, are the ones who are kind of bridging those conversations, right? They're the ones who are connecting their research to another group. And they are often the translators for that, research for their own field. And I think that that's a great opportunity because then you see the value of listening and hearing how other people might interpret that, and then thinking about how that you can make it even more. So I definitely agree. I think that there are skills and tools that can be used in that. And I actually think that one of the reasons why, when we were at AAAS, we focused a lot of our workshops on graduate students is because we felt like they already understood they were there. They were still learning the research themselves, but they were also seeing how challenging it was to communicate among disciplines. And so thinking about strategies for doing that across scientists is really helpful, I think, for thinking of public audiences. The only thing I would say is that really thinking through how you make those connections to the public audience is important. I think we have a natural built-in, oh, this is another graduate student, or this is another scientist in their field. I have some opportunity to connect with them. Those connections may not be so natural for other audiences. So that's one piece to think about.
I actually had a question about use of ChatGPT. What do you think about using ChatGPT as a tool to translate scientific research into more easily digestible content for different audiences? What are some of the benefits and what are the risks?
That's actually something that a lot of groups are looking into. And I think that there's probably some services that are available related to that too. I think it's a great like any tool, right? That any tool that can help with conversation and thinking about changing words, translating words. I think that can be really useful so that there's opportunity. Like with anything though, you have to look at it and not just send it. Like, okay, I did this thing, send, right? Or I did this thing, okay, I'm definitely going to use that. Is this usable? Is this something that's interpretable? Are there other ways to include? But I definitely think it can help. I think one thing we have with ChatGPT, and this is just my perspective, is there's kind of the negative connotation and the positive, like this is so great for so many things and this is so challenging for so many things. And like with anything, it's going to develop over time and get better. But I already see, the email stuff, there's some pieces where it's like, okay, this is a very similar email. I can just do, copy and paste and do a very similar thing. There's going to be a lot of good automation there.
Great. Alexandra raises a really important concern that, unfortunately, we're facing a situation where there is some pushback against scientific research, right? There's tending to be more mis and disinformation spreading, especially around vaccines. Do you have any tools or ideas to help share information and start a conversation with an audience that may be vaccine hesitant or afraid? And before I pass it to you, Allie has another really good point, and I love this. We teach our members to start with connection, not correction.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad that this is part of the conversation. You all are thinking about this. Obviously, we've had such a challenging time in the last several years in terms of how people are interpreting information just generally. I would say this is not just a science issue, right? This is just like information in general. How are people getting information? How are they interpreting it and deciding what to believe or what they think is real? So there's a lot to unpack there. We probably don't have time to talk about all the different areas and opportunities, but I do think that thinking about it from a point of, and I was trying to say this a little bit in my talk earlier, what are the connections that we have? How can we make a connection that is not just about you're wrong and I'm right, or you're not listening and I'm the right person? I think we really need to come at it from the thing of I'm trying to understand you as much as you may be trying to understand me. And so I think that that's a really important piece to think about all the time. That we don't maybe have all the answers. If we did, these might not be issues. These are a lot of social implications of why things are the way that they are. And I think scientists in general need to have a bit more sensitivity to being open and receptive to hearing other people's perspectives about that, so that they can think about how can I interpret that information that I'm getting from other people to better present it to people, so that they can maybe engage with this information in a different way.
Yeah, that's really helpful. One thing we teach our community through the CITRIS Policy Lab is to do like stakeholder audience mapping. Who needs to know about this issue, and also kind of marking down, are they an ally? Are they on board with the way that we're thinking about this, or do we expect that there will be some hurdles in our communication? If there are, what are the best strategies for making sure that we can be on even footing and be able to talk with each other?
That's great, Brandie. And I wonder if that's something that, as they're doing the actual engagements and having opportunities to do that, going back and fixing, right? So like, I'm getting more information about what's actually happening. Now I can have a better strategy. I think that's the piece that is really helpful for people to think about. These should be updatable, right? So we shouldn't just go in and say, this is the way it's going to be, because I know everything I need to know about this audience. As we have those stakeholder engagements, correcting our own assumptions and
Absolutely.
making sure that we update things in a way that's helpful, so that we're learning as well.
Exactly. And this is a nice tie to Mikkel's question. Would you recommend that scientists and their labs develop a strategic communications plan, even if somewhat informal? These are essential in a professional space, but very uncommon in a lab environment. And I would add to that question, how might you do that?
That's a great question. I mean, I actually think it's kind of case dependent, right? So part of this comes back to what is it that you're trying to accomplish and why. I think that some labs probably need a much more, forceful, like, this is exactly what we're going to do and this is how we're going to communicate it. And some may be much more lax in terms of, we're going to come and do the opportunities as they're available. But I do think the how that you had, Brandie, is if that was something that was of interest to a lab or a researcher or a scientist, I think making sure that the PI is bought into it would probably be important. And then also working with a professional who can help you think about what it is you're going to do. We do this quite a bit actually with individuals. I wouldn't say for an entire lab, but going to a person and saying, what is it that you want to accomplish? How are we going to get you to that place? How can we connect this to other opportunities that you have? What additional things are coming up for you? What papers are coming? What conferences are you going to? What policy conversations are you already part of? And how can we be strategic about thinking about new opportunities that you might want to engage in? And I will say that also means not doing all the things, right? You have to determine which are the most important, what we say, biggest bang for your buck. How are you going to do the most that you possibly can and connect it to things that are already happening, as opposed to creating a whole new program.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question from Darcy: contrasting the way science was communicated in a pre-social media world to now, what is the biggest difference in approach you have observed?
Oh, I think that's probably, there's a lot of different things, Darcy, and it's nice to see you. How are you doing? So I think one of the things is probably just that people are so much more aware of how public the conversations are. I think and generally, I'm thinking from a scientist perspective. It used to be, we're going to have our conversation in the journal article, and then the other scientists at some point are going to get back and say what they think is going to happen. Now I think things are happening so fast and so publicly that people are much more understanding of the need to think about how we're having public conversations. And I think scientists are much more sensitive to that and more concerned, I would say. This is the other piece, because they see some of the disinformation and misinformation. Now we're getting into deep fakes, which are election potentially influencing. There's a lot of concern, I think, societally about how are we participating in this conversation? How are we helping to provide good, accurate information? What can we be doing better? And how do we do that in a way that is understanding and receptive to the fact that not everybody agrees with us? And so we need to be thinking about it from a much more holistic way. And I think that instead of just I put my journal article out and I sat back and then waited for things to happen.
Yeah, exactly. There's another question from somebody. Do you have any advice for someone looking to transition from a laboratory-based science role to a science communication-focused career?
Oh, I've had this conversation many times in my 24 years, as you might imagine. I actually got into this from a communication space and talked to scientists and realized, oh, I can make a difference. And like, actually, science is really hard to communicate, and this will be a challenge forever. It's not going to go away. It's going to get harder, not easier. But I totally understand there are people within science spaces or research spaces who are interested in going into more, what did they used to say, alternative careers. I think now, it's not alternative careers. There are many different ways that scientists can participate in conversations. One thing I would say to you, no matter what kind of career you're interested in, if it's communications, if it was policy, anything, go and get some experience. Go and talk to people who do this already. Try to understand how they got to where they are and what kinds of things might be useful for you in doing that. I have talked to a lot of PhD scientists who've been very lab focused, and all of a sudden they say, oh, now I want to go write. And I say, okay, but you need to do some writing. You need to get some experience doing that. You might want to go through a program. There are lots of different things available for people who want to make that transition, but doing some research, just like you would for a research career, about what's available in that space and how can I meet with the people who would actually be able to help me make that transition.
Okay, that's really good advice.
And I'm always happy to be one of those people, by the way. If anyone's interested, I'll have my email at the end too.
Yeah. I've been in a few trainings where they've centered storytelling as a way to reach different audiences, kind of pull at the heartstrings of individuals to make it memorable. How do you balance that with this idea of bluff, bottom line up front, get to the point?
Yeah, I think
there's a little tension there, or maybe it's just different for different deliverables. But I think that
sometimes it's the style. So part of it is also thinking about who the person is and what they're interested in doing. I think there are certain scientists that are very good natural storytellers, and there are those that have gotten much better by doing it multiple times. And so for some people, that is a natural thing for them to do because they have a great story to tell. And if they work with someone to even think about how to do it more and better, then that's an opportunity. But I do think not everyone is that way, and not everyone's comfortable going up and telling a story about their life and explaining, so I think that it can be both ways. It's not one or the other. And I think that there's value in thinking about both of them. And part of this kind of, to me, gets back to what is it you're trying to accomplish and what mechanisms are you using? Some mechanisms are really good for storytelling. Some are not. So I think that that's part of it too.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'm going to call out that, put a resource in the chat. There is a UC Santa Cruz one-year science communication program, but also calling out the National Association of Science Writers. And there's one in the Bay Area, which seems like it'd be a very helpful resource for those individuals looking to sharpen their skills in science communication.
Absolutely. And I know the person who runs the Santa Cruz program. I can highly recommend it. It's great that we have that within the UC system.
That's great. Are there any other questions? I believe that we've addressed all of the questions that have been input into the chat. We'll just hold for a minute to see if there are any. Another one just popped in. Karina, question for the scientists in the room. How might you use the goal of communicating science for social impact to inspire you to run for public office? We need scientists to inform policy directly. I like that one.
There's been some examples of people who have done that at the national and local level. So I think that that's increasingly being a conversation of scientists who are in the space, who see the opportunities in public life.
Great. And another great resource from Mikkel here. We have an opportunity coming up with science communication plus policy training and a chance to share your research at the state capitol. Apply by October 30th, just in time for Halloween, so you can enjoy yourself on the 31st. Thank you for sharing that resource. All right, any other questions?
I'm just going to put in my email in case people want to reach me directly, because I'm happy to talk about any of these things or provide additional resources or sources or anything like that.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. And if you will stop sharing, I will share a final slide.
Sure.
Thank you. All right. Thank you to everybody, and especially you, Tiffany, for providing this very, very informative presentation on how to be an effective science communicator. Again, we want to highlight our upcoming workshops coming up next Friday, leveraging your research for policy impact. Following that, pitching the president. How do you actually provide effective guidance to policymakers, and a writing workshop? And our last workshop will be engaging with legislative and regulatory processes. Please register. They will all be recorded. Those Zoom recordings will be made available on the website, citrispolicylab.org/SCPI workshops.